What's up guys, it's Panther, and today I wanted to do a in-depth guide on Irelia, since she is a quintessential part of both top and mid lane currently, both in solo queue and competitive play. Now the fantastic part about Irelia is her kit is very simple to begin with, yet the way that it interacts with itself makes it so that Irelia's skill cap is almost limitless. This means that even though the sky is about the limit on Irelia, she's not insanely hard to pick up since her kit is pretty basic when you get down to it. Before we get into the video, I want to remind you to like and subscribe. We post new content done by challenger players every day. If you've been enjoying our content lately and want to see every release that we do, make sure to hit that bell. Now the obvious starting point for Irelia is her Q, her bread and butter. This ability is everything to Irelia. It's her source of damage, mobility, and sustain. Usually how well you use your Q on Irelia dictates how good of an Irelia player you are. That being said, as the game progresses, you use your Q for different reasons. At early stages in the game, in the laning phase, mostly you're just going to be wanting to use your Q in order to sustain off of the wave and build your passive stacks. Now I see two huge mistakes at this point in the game that you're going to want to avoid. Now the first mistake is you overcommit on an early fight. Remember, just because your passive is fully stacked does not mean that you should go on to take an extended trade. At early stages in the game, make sure you're taking minion damage into account. If you're fighting in a huge enemy wave, you're going to get a beatdown by the enemy minions, so you need to take that into consideration. If you do find yourself fighting in too large of a wave, try to use your Q to disengage. Q one of the enemy melee minions that's closest to your tower and walk away, and then use your W to negate any of the residual minion damage that might be coming through from ranged minions. You can also use this technique to mitigate tower damage early on into the game if you accidentally take a tower shot. Early on into the game, it's better to use your W more as a kind of bailout mechanic in case you make a mistake than to use it aggressively, because if you put it on cooldown when you really need it, then you're going to be in deep trouble. Remember, your W is your biggest defensive tool, especially against physical damage in the early game, so make sure you're using it for that purpose. I'd say the usage of Irelia's E is the second largest variance between different Irelia players. Now, since this ability is completely unique in how it works, and it's not like any other ability in the game, it is going to take a lot of time to learn and perfect. And that's okay. It's okay to spend a lot of time learning how to land Irelia's E's. That's not a problem, and that's completely normal for everyone. One thing to keep in mind when you're using this ability is don't box yourself into only using it a certain way. Since it is such a unique ability, you can use it in so many creative ways, so try not to limit yourself when you're using this ability, and just think of new creative ways that you can use it. If you want to see how other players use Irelia's E, I'd highly recommend watching Faker and Caps play Irelia. These two players are very creative when it comes to their E's, and they do things that you would never expect them to do with Irelia's E. They also are very easy to watch, as there are VODs of them everywhere, both on YouTube and on Twitch. Lighter is another Irelia god that just makes things that don't seem like they should be possible happen, although his VODs are a little bit harder to find, but if you can find them, I'd highly recommend watching him as well. Again, Irelia's E is just such a unique ability, and the best way to learn how to use it is just to watch the best use her. Irelia's ultimate is by far the simplest part of her kit. Really, the only thing you do is you aim it at the enemy team and you use it. There's not much else to it. Obviously, the more people you hit, the better, but there aren't any real tricks to using this ability. You can combo it with Flash, but that's about it. The biggest difference between good and bad Irelias is good Irelias will use their mobility to get better ults. Now, as we've been getting further and further into Irelia's kit, I'm sure you can see that this kit meshes so well together, and as a result, the better you're able to use this kit as a whole, the better you're going to be in general as an Irelia player. Starting in the laning phase, I want to show you some of the things that Caps does in order to really utilize the entirety of Irelia's kit. Irelia's level 1 is fairly strong due to her ability to spam her Qs on the wave. She's then able to initiate on the enemy laner with a 4th Q, fighting with 4 of her passive stacks, which gives her quite a bit of attack speed. This, paired with Conqueror, especially in a long lane like top lane, can be very, very punishing for the enemy laner. Oftentimes you're able to take massive HP chunks off of the enemy laner even at level 1, prepping for a level 2 all-in, as you can see Caps does here. It is also okay to take W level 2 if you're playing into a hyper-aggressive lane such as Riven or Renekton. Remember, E is for kill pressure and W is for safety. If you're into a super aggressive lane that beats you at level 1, you can also just start E so you're able to farm at level 1 from range. Early levels are very, very flexible when it comes to Irelia, so make sure you know how to play each and every one of them. Before you purchase Tiamat, one thing you might look to do on Irelia early is freeze. This is because the more enemy minions that Irelia has to work with, the more mobility, sustain, and therefore damage she will have. Remember, fighting in bigger waves actually oftentimes will benefit Irelia as opposed to hurt her like it would other champions. If you're able to maintain an early freeze on Irelia, oftentimes you'll be able to zone the enemy laner from massive amounts of CS. Obviously, once you purchase Tiamat, freezing is no longer an option as you're just going to auto-shove the wave with your Tiamat, but that's okay too. Once you do have Tiamat, you'll actually unlock the ability to kind of daisy chain your Qs off each other on the minion wave. This allows you to build up your passive quickly, get a lot of attack speed, and that additional on-hit damage that everyone wants. Keep in mind that level 4 and 5 aren't too overwhelming for Irelia. She doesn't get all too much from it, and she's really just looking to get her level 6 at that point. This means she should be very careful against other champions that power spike heavily on levels 4 and 5, as she is susceptible to losing hard trades at that point. Champions like Talon, Renekton, Karma, Jace can all beat her at level 5 especially, so be very careful at that level. Once you do have your level 6 and Tiamat on Irelia, one thing that you can do is look to roam, especially if you're playing mid lane Irelia. She's able to shove waves very, very quickly with Tiamat plus Q spam, which will allow her to outshove almost every single mid laner in the game. This opens up very early roam timers, which allows you to pressure the map earlier than other mid laners would be able to. Irelia is also able to roam into the jungle pretty easily once she has Tiamat, and she can even steal away enemy raptors. This isn't all too dangerous for her, as she doesn't really need to use her other abilities to steal raptors. She can just take it with Tiamat and Q, and if necessary, she's able to mark large monsters and dash to them, keeping her dash up for even more mobility. This is one of the benefits that mid lane Irelia has over top lane. She's just able to get a lot more CS than top lane Irelia is able to. She also plays into significantly easier lanes, as sometimes Irelia does struggle into certain bruiser matchups. In the laning phase, once you do have your level 6, you're going to want to start looking to trade with the enemy laner. If you ever land a stun, that is a very good opportunity to take a huge chunk of HP off of the enemy laner. If you take the enemy laner down to even around 70% HP, oftentimes you can all-in them from that point, resulting in a kill with your ultimate. One thing you should look to do is prep minions with auto attacks, and then use your Q to climb the wave towards the enemy champion. This allows you to exert a much larger zone of control than if you were to just stand on the enemy minions and prevent the enemy champion from CSing. You can also sometimes trick the enemy champion into farming and thinking that it's safe when in reality it's not. Remember, queuing through waves of minions on Irelia only stands to benefit her, as it gives her attack speed and sustain. This is why you always want to fight on a prepped wave as Irelia. You'll be able to build up your passive quicker, meaning you'll deal more damage. Be careful you don't kill all of the creeps in the wave though, because you always want to leave at least one creep alive in order to bail you out in case the fight goes poorly. I see so many people just spam Q on wave, kill the whole wave, and then go for a trade. This is not ideal, as if the trade goes poorly, you now have absolutely no escape route. Try to keep a few minions alive, that way you have a way to get out if you need to. Now, moving on into the mid-game, you're going to be starting to see a little bit of teamfighting breaking out. Irelia's role in teamfighting is typically for her to be a diver/interrupter. She wants to try to kill the enemy carries as quickly as possible and throw down as much CC and interrupt as she can. Irelia is very, very good at tanking physical damage, so oftentimes what you'll look to do is to nuke the mage with your abilities and then take the ADC out in a more extended fight afterwards. One of the big mistakes I see a lot of Irelia players making is they will focus down the ADC and the mage will just blow them up. Remember, your W no longer reduces magic damage and it's only physical damage now. This means you should be trying to eliminate the magic damage on the enemy team as quickly as possible so that you're able to sustain a fight longer. You're not going to be useful if you just get nuked by a Syndra, for example. One of the things that Irelia really excels in the late game is taking objectives like Baron. Her passive allows her to deal a lot of damage to the objective, and she has absolutely no problem tanking them. This means you should definitely look for fights around Baron if possible, and if they don't want to fight you, then just take the Baron. With a big enough lead, Irelia is able to decimate Baron fights, especially if the enemy team is all funneling into a choke point. The more people you hit with your R, the better the fight is going to go for you. Do not be afraid to flash for a big ultimate on Irelia late game, as these can turn the tide of the game. Another option that you do have on Irelia is split pushing. Again, with her passive, she kills towers very quickly. Once late game does approach, Irelia really becomes a jack of all trades, and she can do anything that you need her to do. If the enemy team has a better teamfight comp than you, then you should just look to split push on Irelia, and if your team has the strong teamfight comp, then you can definitely look to group as well. Irelia is even able to pull off 1v2s in the side lane. This is something that you should be super careful about though. You don't just want to be running at people trying to 1v2 all game if you don't have to. That just about does it for today's guide on Irelia. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. We post new content done by challenger players every day. If you haven't already, make sure to check out our website. There we have hundreds of videos all done by challenger players. These videos are organized into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses on the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion specific courses. There we've started an Irelia course that has a few other videos in it, so if you're interested in them, be sure to check it out. As always, I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next one.